The day Earth joined the Galactic Alliance was supposed to be peaceful, almost beautiful, but for him it felt like the sky was holding its breath, waiting for something to go wrong. The cultural pairing program had been explained many times on every screen across the planet. Humans would be matched with partners from friendly alien species to build trust, unity, and long-term peace. The videos showed gentle blue-skinned healers, soft-spoken star scholars, smiling plant-like beings who glowed in warm colors. People laughed, families cried with happiness, and social media filled with pictures of happy couples meeting for the first time. Everyone kept saying humanity was lucky. Everyone kept saying the future looked soft and kind. He did not expect anything special for himself. He was just another citizen standing in a long line outside the selection hall, waiting for his name to appear on the massive holographic screen floating above the city square. The air was warm, music played, and drones flew overhead broadcasting the event to other planets. One by one, names appeared in glowing letters. Cheers followed almost every match. A teacher was paired with a peaceful aquatic scientist. A mechanic was paired with a gentle energy empath. A nurse was paired with a smiling alien diplomat. Every story sounded safe. Every partner looked calm. When his name finally appeared, the cheering stopped. Not slowly, not softly. It stopped all at once. The music faded as if someone had pulled the power cord. His match did not show a smiling healer or a peaceful scholar. Instead, the screen turned red. A symbol appeared, sharp and edged like a blade, and beneath it, a title that many in the crowd recognized instantly. Princess Valara of the Crimson Dominion, Fleet Commander, the Crimson Blade. A quiet whisper spread through the crowd. The Crimson Blade was not known for peace ceremonies or cultural dances. She was known for ending wars. She had led battle fleets across 3 sectors. She had defeated pirate kings and rebel warlords. There were stories that she never smiled during combat, that she walked through fire without fear, that entire armies surrendered when her flagship entered orbit. Some said she had never lost a battle. He stared at the screen, thinking there must be a mistake. The cultural pairing program was meant to connect compatible personalities, to build gentle bonds, not to assign a human civilian to one of the most feared warrior princesses in the Alliance. Around him, people stepped back slightly, not because of him, but because of the name floating above his head. A message appeared beneath the title. Direct transmission incoming. His wrist device vibrated. A secure channel opened automatically, and her voice came through, clear and steady. Prepare yourself, human. I will arrive in 1 hour. No greeting, no warmth, just certainty. The square slowly emptied after that. People avoided his eyes. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity. A few whispered that he must have done something wrong to receive such a match. He walked home through streets that felt quieter than before. Screens continued showing smiling couples from other cities, but none showed red war symbols. Exactly 1 hour later, the sky darkened. It was not clouds, it was not night. It was something massive blocking the sun. A warship descended from orbit, long and sharp like a blade pointed toward the planet. Engines glowed deep crimson, and smaller escort ships formed a protective circle around it. The air shook with controlled power as the ship lowered itself above the city, not attacking, not threatening, just present. Crowds gathered again, but this time in silence. A beam of light formed between the ship and the central landing platform in the square. Soldiers stepped down first, tall figures in red armor with glowing lines across their helmets. They moved in perfect order, forming 2 lines, weapons resting at their sides but ready. Their presence alone felt heavy. As she stepped forward, Princess Valara was taller than most humans. Her armor was dark crimson with silver edges, marked by small scars that told stories of battle. A long blade rested across her back, not decorative, not ceremonial. Her face was uncovered, sharp features, pale skin with faint glowing markings near her temples. Her eyes scanned the crowd once, calculating, calm, unreadable. When her gaze found him, she walked directly toward him without hesitation. The soldiers remained behind. The entire square seemed to shrink around them. He noticed that she moved like someone trained for war since childhood. Every step balanced, every breath measured. She stopped in front of him, studying him as if he were an unfamiliar weapon placed in her hand. There was no anger in her expression, but there was no softness either, only assessment. "So," she said quietly, yet her voice carried across the silent square, "you are the human assigned to me." He met her eyes. His heart was beating fast, but he did not step back. "Yes," he answered simply. Her gaze sharpened slightly. "They told me humans were fragile creatures who preferred comfort and safety." The crowd held its breath. She tilted her head a little, as if trying to understand him. "Are you fragile, human?" For a moment, the future of his life felt balanced on that single question. The warship hovered above them like a second sky. The soldiers watched without moving. The entire planet seemed to be listening. He took a slow breath and replied, "I guess you're about to find out." Somewhere in the crowd, someone remembered to breathe again. And far above them, inside the massive warship that had never bowed to anyone, a quiet system recorded something unusual. For the first time since she began commanding fleets, Princess Valara did not look completely certain. And before the story continues, the channel gently reminds you to subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. The silence in the square did not break immediately after his answer. It stretched between them like a thin wire pulled too tight. Princess Valara studied him for several long seconds, as if she expected him to flinch, to lower his eyes, or to apologize for his own bravery. But he did none of those things. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, looking back at the most feared warrior in 3 sectors. A faint change appeared in her expression, not a smile, not approval, but curiosity. "Confidence without evidence is foolish," she said calmly. "I will test whether your words have weight." Without warning, she turned away from him and signaled to her soldiers. Within minutes, the peaceful city square transformed into something else. Portable combat drones lifted from the warship and projected a circular training field around them. A transparent energy wall rose, sealing the space. The crowd stepped back quickly, their celebration replaced by tension. This was no longer a cultural welcome. This looked like preparation for battle. He did not move from his spot inside the field. He watched as Valara removed the long blade from her back and handed it to one of her officers. "This will not require steel," she said. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had never needed a weapon to win. She faced him again. "If you are to stand beside me, you must not collapse under pressure." The ground beneath them shifted slightly as gravity inside the field increased. It was subtle at first, then heavier. His knees felt the difference immediately. The air felt thick. Every breath required more effort. Some humans outside the barrier gasped. They could see the change in his posture. "This is standard training gravity for my soldiers," Valara explained. Almost casually, survive standing for 5 minutes. 5 minutes sounded small, but under crushing weight, time stretched painfully. He felt his muscles tremble, sweat formed on his forehead. His legs wanted to give in. The pressure pushed against his chest like invisible hands. Valara circled him slowly, watching carefully. "Most species adapt quickly," she continued. "Humans are said to prefer comfort." He focused on breathing, slow and steady. He did not answer her. He did not complain. He had no great plan, no secret power, only stubbornness. The gravity increased again. A murmur moved through the crowd. Even some of her own soldiers shifted slightly, observing, measuring. The test was becoming serious. His knees bent for a moment, almost touching the ground. A wave of whispers rose from outside the barrier. Some expected him to collapse fully, to prove that the pairing was a mistake. Valara stopped walking. Her eyes narrowed slightly. He placed one hand on the ground, not in surrender, but to steady himself. Then he pushed upward slowly, muscles shaking, breath uneven, but rising again to stand straight. The 5 minutes ended. The gravity field faded. The pressure lifted instantly, and he nearly lost balance from the sudden change. But he caught himself, refusing to fall in front of her. Silence returned. Valara looked at him differently now, not as a fragile civilian, but not yet as an equal. "Interesting," she said quietly. The test, however, was not over. She lifted her hand, and a combat drone dropped a training staff into the field. It rolled across the floor and stopped near his feet. "Defend yourself," she instructed. He picked up the staff, feeling its weight. It was unfamiliar, heavier than anything he had trained with before. Across from him, she stepped into position, unarmed, but her posture alone felt like a weapon. She moved first, fast enough that some in the crowd barely saw the motion. He reacted too late. Her strike connected with his shoulder and sent him sliding across the field. The impact was controlled, not lethal, but powerful enough to show the gap between them. Gasps filled the square. He stood again, gripping the staff tighter. She attacked again, a blur of precision. He blocked one strike by accident, missed the next, and felt the shock travel through his arms. Every movement she made was efficient, trained through years of war. But something shifted during the third exchange. Instead of trying to match her speed, he stepped back, observing. He noticed patterns, small pauses before she changed direction, a slight turn of her shoulder before a heavier strike. He was not stronger, not faster, but he was watching carefully. When she lunged again, he did not try to overpower her. He redirected the staff sideways, causing her momentum to carry her slightly off balance. It was small, barely visible, but it was enough to surprise her. Her eyes sharpened. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply adjusted his stance, learning in real time. The fight continued for several more exchanges. She landed more hits than he did, but each time he rose faster, adapted quicker. Her attacks became more serious, not angry, but focused, as if she had decided he was no longer a simple demonstration. Finally, she stepped back on her own, raising her hand to stop the match. The energy barrier dissolved, the drone's power down. He stood there breathing heavily, bruised, shoulders aching, but still standing. Valara approached slowly, close enough that only he could clearly hear her next words. "You are weaker than me," she said calmly, "but you do not retreat." She studied his face again, searching for fear, for doubt, for resentment. She found none of it, only determination. "That makes you dangerous," she added softly, almost to herself. Above them, her massive warship remained suspended in the sky, but something inside the princess had shifted slightly. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she was no longer certain that this pairing was a mistake. And somewhere deep within her disciplined warrior mind, a quiet thought formed. This human might not break so easily. The training field was dismantled within the hour, and the square slowly returned to its peaceful design. But nothing felt the same anymore. The citizens of Earth had expected music and gentle introductions, not the echo of combat strikes under an alien warship. Princess Valara remained on the planet instead of returning to her fleet, which surprised many observers across the Alliance. Her flagship moved into high orbit, visible at night, like a second red moon watching over the city. He was given temporary residence inside a diplomatic tower prepared for interspecies pairs. It was modern, comfortable, filled with soft lighting and calm designs meant to ease cultural tension. Yet when Valara entered the space for the first time, she treated it like hostile territory. Her eyes scanned every corner, every shadow, every reflection in the glass. She noted the exits, the blind spots, the structural weaknesses. He noticed that she did not sit immediately. She stood near a wall, with clear sight lines, back straight, hands relaxed but ready. "You can sit," he said gently. "I prefer standing," she replied without hesitation. Hours passed with few words between them. She examined Earth data on a hovering screen, studying human history, wars, recovery cycles, technological growth. He watched her quietly and began to see something others did not. Her movements were controlled, but there was tension under that control, like a blade held too long without rest. Late in the evening, he brought her a cup of tea. Steam rose softly from the surface. The scent was mild, chosen carefully from local herbs meant to calm nerves. She looked at the cup as if it were an unfamiliar device. "It is not a trap," he said, placing it on the table near her. "It helps humans slow down." "I do not require slowing," she answered, but her voice was softer than before. He did not argue. He simply sat down on one of the chairs, relaxed, not watching her like a threat, not trying to impress her, After several silent minutes, she stepped forward and picked up the cup, studying the liquid as though it might attack her. She took a small sip, paused, then another. "It is warm," she said, almost confused. "Yes," he replied. "Warm is not weakness." She did not respond to that, but she did not put the cup down either. That night, he woke to a faint metallic sound. The room was dark except for the distant red glow of her warship in the sky. He stepped quietly into the main living area and saw her standing near the window, fully armored, blade attached to her back, eyes focused on the horizon. "There is no attack," he said calmly. "I heard a structural shift in the building," she replied. "I prepared." "It was probably just temperature change," he said. "Buildings move at night sometimes." She did not remove her armor. "On my world, structures move only when struck." He realized then that her entire life had been shaped by conflict. There was no space in her experience for peaceful explanations, only tactical ones. Over the next few days, he observed more small details. She ate quickly and sparingly, never turning her back fully to a door, never allowing silence to stretch too long without scanning it. When vehicles passed loudly outside, her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. When distant fireworks celebrated another human-alien pairing, her hand moved instinctively toward where her blade would be. One evening, while reviewing battle reports from her fleet, her hand froze above the display. He noticed her breathing change slightly, not fear, but something heavier. "You can talk about it," he said quietly, not demanding, not pushing. She stared at the screen for a long moment before deactivating it. "Talking does not change outcomes," she said. "It changes weight," he answered. She looked at him then, truly looked at him, as if trying to understand what kind of strength did not involve weapons. "When I was 12 cycles old," she began slowly, voice steady but distant. "My world was invaded by a coalition that believed my people were too aggressive to be trusted. They came with fleets larger than ours. They expected surrender." He remained silent, letting her continue. "My mother was the reigning commander," she said. "She placed a blade in my hand and told me survival is mercy when enemies show none." Her eyes did not water. Her voice did not break. But something inside the words carried weight. "I know my first life before I reached maturity," she continued. "After that, there was no return to childhood. There was only training, strategy, victory, and loss. Every decision shaped by the knowledge that hesitation costs lives." The room felt smaller as she spoke, not because of her presence, but because of the reality she carried. "On my world," she added, "compassion is reserved for after the battle is won." He nodded slowly. "And has the battle ever really ended?" She did not answer immediately. For the first time since arriving on Earth, her posture lowered slightly, not weakness, but fatigue hidden beneath years of discipline. He stood and walked to the kitchen, returning with another cup of tea, placing it gently in her hands without ceremony. "You don't have to fight here," he said softly. She looked at the cup, then at him, as if the idea itself was foreign. "Peace feels like vulnerability," she admitted quietly. "Maybe," he said, "but maybe it is just a different kind of strength." A long silence followed, not tense this time, but thoughtful. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and removed her helmet, placing on the table between them. It was the first time she had done so in his presence without necessity, without readiness for combat. Her face, free from the shadow of armor, looked less like a legend and more like someone who had carried too much for too long. In that quiet room, beneath the red glow of her warship, the most feared warrior princess in the Alliance allowed herself to sit, not as a commander, not as the Crimson Blade, but simply as Valara. And though no one outside the tower could see it, something far more important than any battle had just begun. The peace did not last long. It rarely did when legends walked under open skies. 3 nights after Valara removed her helmet and spoke of her past, the red glow of her warship above the city flickered once, very briefly. Most humans did not notice. They were asleep, trusting the Alliance, trusting the idea that war belonged far away. But inside the diplomatic tower, Valara's eyes opened instantly. She was on her feet before the alarm even sounded. A sharp pulse vibrated through the building, low and deep, like the planet itself had been struck. Then the city lights outside dimmed for half a second before emergency systems activated. In orbit, her flagship shifted position abruptly, engines burning brighter than before. He rushed into the main room and saw her already armored, helmet sealed, blade in hand. "Report," she demanded into her wrist channel. Static answered first, then a broken voice from one of her officers. "Unknown fleet emerging from stealth, bearing Dominion codes, but not transmitting clearance. They are targeting the surface." Her posture changed instantly. The calm warrior who had been learning to sit in peace disappeared. The crimson blade returned. "They came for me," she said quietly, almost to herself. Outside, the sky tore open with streaks of light. Not meteors, not celebration fireworks. These were controlled descent pods breaking through the atmosphere, aimed directly at the city center. The first impact shook the ground hard enough to crack pavement. A plume of smoke rose only 4 blocks away. People began screaming. Sirens echoed through the streets. Panic spread faster than any official warning. He moved toward the window, heart pounding. "What do we do?" "We fight," she replied without hesitation. Her fleet in orbit engaged the hostile ships immediately. Crimson beams crossed the sky, silent from the ground but violent in space. Yet several enemy pods had already landed, and they were not random attackers. Their movement patterns were precise, coordinated, strategic. "They know my tactics," Valara muttered. "Because they are yours," came a new voice through her channel, smooth and cold. "Former Dominion officers do not forget their training." Her jaw tightened beneath the helmet. "General Kale," she said, recognizing the voice. "You were never meant to bond with a lesser species," the general continued. "Your pairing dishonors the Dominion. Return with us, and Earth remains untouched." Another explosion rocked the district, closer this time. Valara's hand tightened around her blade. "You threaten civilians to prove loyalty," she said, voice steady but burning beneath the surface. "I remove weakness," Kale answered, starting with this human distraction. The transmission cut. She turned toward him. "Stay inside," she ordered. "The tower has defensive shielding." But through the smoke outside, he saw something that made his stomach tighten. A group of civilians trapped near one of the impact sites. Emergency vehicles unable to reach them because debris blocked the road, and approaching from the other side, armored Dominion soldiers advancing in formation. "They are targeting evacuation routes," he said quickly. Valara moved toward the exit without hesitation. He followed. "I told you to remain," she snapped. "And I told you I'm not fragile," he replied, breath steady despite the chaos. For half a second, she considered forcing him back inside, but there was no time. Another impact shook the ground. They reached the street just as Dominion soldiers rounded the corner. Their armor matched Valara's style but darker, marked with the insignia of rebellion. Energy rifles raised, scanning. Valara stepped forward, blade igniting with a low hum. The first soldier fired. The shot missed her by inches as she moved faster than human eyes could follow. Her blade cut clean through the rifle before striking the armor joint beneath it. The soldier fell instantly. The fight exploded into motion. He grabbed a fallen emergency drone from the street. Its interface damaged but still active. He connected it to his wrist device. Fingers moving quickly. He was not a soldier, but he understood systems. He rerouted the drone's camera feed to nearby police networks, marking safe path for civilians to escape. Behind him, Valara moved like controlled lightning. Every strike efficient, every motion deliberate. 2 soldiers advanced together. She redirected one shot into the other's armor, then disarmed both in seconds. But more pods were landing. Above them, her warship was now fully engaged, exchanging fire with Kale's fleet. One hostile cruiser broke through and descended lower than the others, its cannons turning toward the city grid. "They are escalating," he said, seeing the cruisers targeting lines on the emergency drone feed. Valara saw it too. "If that cruiser fires at full output, this district will collapse," she said, calculating angles instantly. "Can your ship stop it?" he asked. "Not before it releases payload," she answered. He swallowed once. then looked at the map streaming across his wrist device. There's a power relay beneath this block, he said quickly. If we overload it at the right moment, the energy surge might disrupt the cruiser's targeting lock. She turned her helmeted gaze toward him, assessing. It will cause a blackout, he added, but it could save thousands. Without another word, she pivoted and cleared a path toward the underground access panel, trusting his judgment in that single decision. He knelt beside the relay controls, hands moving fast, sweat mixing with dust. The cruiser above began charging its weapon, the air vibrating faintly as energy gathered. Now, he shouted. Valara drove her blade into the relay core at the exact second he rerouted the power surge. A blinding flash erupted upward through the grid, energy spiking across the district. In the sky, the cruiser's targeting systems flickered violently, its weapon discharged prematurely, the blast veering off course and detonating harmlessly in upper atmosphere. A collective shockwave of light rippled across the clouds. The cruiser retreated immediately, engines flaring as Valara's flagship capitalized on the opening. On the ground, the remaining Dominion soldiers withdrew, regrouping toward their extraction pods. Silence fell slowly, broken only by distant sirens and the crackle of damaged systems rebooting. Valara stood amid the smoke, armor scratched, energy blade dimming as she powered it down. She turned toward him. You disobeyed a direct command, she said firmly. He nodded, breathing hard, and helped win. For a long moment, she simply stared at him. Then her gaze shifted to the civilians now evacuating safely down the paths he had mapped. You fought without a weapon, she said quietly. I fought with what I had, he answered. Above them, the red warship stabilized in orbit once more, but the message was clear. The attack had not been random. It had been personal, and as emergency lights flickered back to full power across the city, Princess Valara realized something far more dangerous than enemy fleets had just occurred. For the first time, she had not fought alone. The city was still covered in smoke when they returned to the diplomatic tower. Emergency teams moved through the streets below, clearing debris, helping the injured, restoring power above the planet. Valara's flagship held position like a silent guardian, but its surface now showed fresh burn marks from the battle. The attack had been pushed back, but it had not been small. It had been a message. Inside the tower, the tension did not fade with the danger. Valara removed her helmet slowly, placing it on the table with controlled precision. There was a thin fracture across one side of her armor, and faint energy burns along her left shoulder. He noticed the way she favored that side, slightly when she moved. You're injured, he said quietly. It is minor, she replied automatically, but her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. He stepped closer, examining the damage more carefully. Minor injuries still need care, he said, retrieving a medical kit from the wall panel. She watched him as if unsure whether to resist. Her entire life had taught her to endure pain without assistance, to stand even when systems inside her armor signaled damage. On her world, weakness invited challenge. He cleaned the burn carefully, movement steady, not rushed, not afraid. You risked yourself for civilians, he said after a moment. They were within my protection zone, she answered. That's not what I meant, he replied softly. You could have forced them to evacuate and focused only on defeating the attackers. Instead, you shielded them. She did not respond. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Outside, news channels across Earth replayed footage of the battle. Humans saw the warrior princess defending their streets, standing between alien soldiers and terrified families. The narrative began to shift already, fear slowly mixing with respect. Inside the tower, Valara sat down, something she would not have done days earlier during a crisis. General Kale will not stop, she said finally, eyes distant. He believes my bond with Earth weakens the Dominion's image of strength. He will challenge my authority formally before the High Command. What does that mean? He asked. It means I must prove that this pairing does not diminish my power, she replied, or I lose command of my fleets. The weight of that statement settled in the room. You would choose your fleets over this, he asked carefully. She looked at him sharply, then away. My duty is not optional, she said, but there was hesitation beneath the words. He finished sealing the medical patch on her shoulder, then stepped back. And what about what you want? The question seemed to catch her off guard more than any attack had. Desire is irrelevant in command, she answered automatically. Maybe that's the problem, he said. She stood abruptly, pacing once across the room, tension returning to her movements. You do not understand the structure of my people, she said. Authority is maintained through strength, through victories, through discipline. If I appear divided, others will exploit it. And if you keep fighting every battle alone, he replied calmly, you will lose something else. She stopped walking. What? She asked quietly. Yourself, he said. The word lingered in the air longer than expected. Valara's expression hardened for a second, then cracked slightly at the edges, not visible to most, but visible to him. I was raised to become a symbol, she said slowly. A blade that never bends, a commander who does not hesitate. When my mother fell in battle, I inherited more than rank. I inherited expectation. There was no room for doubt. He listened without interrupting. Today, she continued, voice lower. When a cruiser targeted the district, I calculated losses before acting. That is what commanders do. We measure sacrifice. And he prompted gently, and I hesitated, she admitted, barely above a whisper. He did not react with shock. Only patience. I hesitated because you were still below that cruiser's line of fire, she said. For a fraction of a second, my judgment was not purely strategic. He absorbed that quietly. I have never allowed personal attachment to alter combat decisions, she continued, until now. Outside, distant sirens faded as the city stabilized, the chaos of the attack giving way to uneasy calm. You call that weakness, he said carefully, but what if it is strength? She looked at him, confusion mixing with frustration. Strength is control, she said. Strength is also choosing what matters, he replied. Another long silence followed, not empty, but full of shifting thoughts. Valara walked to the window and looked at her warship above, the symbol of everything she had built, everything she had defended. The Dominion expected a commander without compromise. I was not paired with you by mistake, she said suddenly, almost to herself. What do you mean? He asked. The Alliance uses adaptive intelligence to evaluate compatibility, she explained slowly, psychological resilience, moral frameworks, long-term stabilization patterns. It predicted you would counterbalance me. He gave a small, almost amused breath. So I'm your emotional stabilizer. Her lips almost formed the beginning of a smile before discipline pulled it back. You are something my people do not train for, she admitted. And what's that? Stillness under pressure without aggression, she answered. He stepped closer to the window beside her, looking at the red glow above the city. You don't have to fight every battle the same way, he said. She closed her eyes briefly, as if allowing herself one unguarded moment. I am tired, she confessed, the words quiet but undeniable. Tired of proving strength through destruction, tired of being measured only by victories. The admission felt heavier than any weapon she carried. He did not offer dramatic comfort, only stood beside her, steady. You don't have to prove anything to me, he said. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, Valara allowed her shoulders to lower fully, the invisible weight of command easing slightly. When she opened her eyes again, they looked different, not weaker but clearer. General Kale believes he can separate me from this bond, she said calmly. He is wrong. There was no rage in her voice now, only certainty. If he challenges me before the High Command, she continued, then I will answer, but not to protect my pride. To protect what? He asked. She turned to face him fully. To protect what I choose, she said. And in that quiet room beneath a wounded warship and a healing city, the most feared warrior in the Dominion made a decision that would change more than a single battle. She would no longer fight only because she was expected to. She would fight because she wanted to. The Royal Challenge was announced across the Dominion 3 days after the attack. It was not sent as a threat, not disguised as diplomacy. It was formal, ancient, and impossible to ignore. The High Command summoned Princess Valara to stand before them and defend her authority. The accusation was simple. Her bond with a human had compromised her judgment. If she wished to remain fleet commander, she would face a trial of proof. The trial of proof was older than most star systems in their records. It was designed to test not only strength but loyalty and dominance. A commander who passed the trial silenced all doubt. A commander who failed lost rank, fleet, and sometimes more. The location was chosen deliberately. The Crimson Arena, an orbital platform above the Dominion homeworld, built entirely of dark alloy and surrounded by warships like silent witnesses. Millions would watch through live transmission, not only Dominion citizens but allied systems as well, Earth included. Valara stood inside the preparation chamber in full ceremonial armor, deeper crimson than her battle suit, marked with silver lines representing victories from past campaigns. Her expression was calm, almost cold again, but beneath that calm was something new, not hesitation, not fear, something sharper. He stood across from her in simpler attire, no armor, no blade, only a reinforced tactical suit provided by the Alliance. "You do not have to do this," she said firmly. "I know," he replied. The trial required the accused commander to face a challenger chosen by the High Command. General Kale had volunteered personally, confident, calculating, eager to prove that Valara had weakened. "There is no rule requiring you to stand beside me in the arena," she continued. "The challenge is mine. And yet the accusation is about me," he answered calmly. "If they believe I weaken you, then let them see for themselves." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "This is not symbolic combat," she warned. "Kale will not restrain himself." He nodded once. "I'm not planning to overpower him." She studied him carefully, searching for recklessness. She found none, only quiet resolve. The arena doors opened with a deep metallic echo. Light from the surrounding stars spilled into the circular chamber. The floor was smooth black alloy etched with ancient Dominion symbols. Above, layered viewing platforms filled with officers, nobles, and commanders in full armor. Their presence felt like pressure in the air itself. General Kale stepped forward from the opposite side, taller than most Dominion soldiers, armor darker than Valara's, decorated with sharp golden insignia. His eyes moved first to her, then to the human standing at her side. "So this is the fragile influence," Kale said, voice amplified across the arena. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Valara stepped forward. "State the formal charge," she commanded. Kale raised his chin slightly. "You hesitated during battle on Earth. You allowed attachment to alter tactical calculation. You placed a lesser species above Dominion priority." The accusation hung heavy in the air. "And your proof?" Valara asked. "I offer the trial," Kale replied. "Let your human defend your strength. If he stands as your equal, then perhaps the Dominion misjudged." A calculated trap designed to humiliate. The High Command signaled approval. Energy barriers rose around the arena floor, sealing it. Valara turned slightly toward him, voice low so only he could hear. "You may withdraw even now." He shook his head. "You said strength is not only force." She held his gaze for a long second, then stepped back, allowing the challenge to proceed. Kale entered the center of the arena, activating a long energy spear that crackled with controlled power. The weapon was elegant and deadly, designed for both reach and precision. He stepped forward empty-handed. The crowd reacted immediately, low sounds of disbelief spreading through the stands. "No weapon," Kale mocked. "I fight differently," he answered simply. The signal sounded. Kale attacked instantly, spear striking with speed far beyond human reflex. He barely avoided the first thrust by dropping low, feeling the heat pass inches above him. The second strike cut across his shoulder, tearing fabric but missing flesh. The Dominion crowd murmured again, expecting the fight to end quickly. But he did not rush forward blindly. He moved strategically, observing foot placement, weight shifts, spear angles. Kale fought with pride, aggressive and dominant, expecting fear. Instead, he found patience. Each time Kale lunged, The human retreated just enough, forcing the general to adjust position, to extend slightly further than optimal range. Small movements, subtle redirections, nothing flashy. Valara watched from the edge of the arena, silent, unreadable, but her focus never wavered. Kale's strikes became sharper, more forceful. Sparks flew as the spear hit the alloy floor repeatedly. Frustration began creeping into his movements. His breathing changed slightly. The human noticed. During one wide, sweeping attack, he moved toward Kale instead of away, closing the distance unexpectedly. The spear's length became disadvantage instead of advantage. He grabbed the shaft near the base, twisting with sudden force, not to overpower, but to redirect. Kale stumbled half a step, surprised. The arena fell quieter. He released the spear and stepped back instantly, refusing to hold position long enough for a counterstrike. "You rely on dominance," he said evenly, loud enough for the arena to hear. "But dominance is predictable." Kale's eyes burned with anger now. He launched forward with full power, abandoning restraint. That was the moment he had been waiting for. Instead of meeting strength with strength, he pivoted sideways, using Kale's momentum against him, guiding the spear past its mark while driving his shoulder into the general center of gravity. The move was not elegant, not ceremonial, but effective. Kale lost balance and fell hard against the alloy floor, the spear skidding away across the arena. Gasps filled the chamber. He did not strike Kale while he was down. He stepped back, hands open, breathing steady. The message was clear. Strength was not only power, it was control. Kale rose slowly, humiliation mixing with fury. He charged once more, but now the pattern was broken. His movements were reactive instead of calculated. Within seconds, he was disarmed again, this time with no recovery. The High Command's signal lights shifted color, indicating conclusion. The arena barriers lowered. Silence ruled the chamber for a long moment before the senior commander spoke. "The bond does not weaken Fleet Commander Valara," the voice declared. "It expands her capability." Valara stepped forward then, standing beside him at the center of the arena, her presence alone commanding attention. "My strength has never depended on isolation," she said clearly, voice carrying through every level of the platform. "The Dominion grows not by rejecting difference, but by mastering it." Her gaze moved across the gathered officers. "He stands as my equal, not in blade, but in mind," she finished. The declaration echoed beyond the arena, transmitted across systems. And in that moment, the royal challenge ended not with blood, but with something far more dangerous to old traditions. Change. The transmission of the royal challenge did not end when the arena lights dimmed. It continued across systems, replayed in military halls, in civilian districts, on quiet planets that had once feared the Dominion War fleets. What they saw was not a commander losing control, not a warrior weakened by attachment. They saw something unfamiliar, a princess who chose partnership without surrendering power. Valara and the humans stood at the center of the Crimson Arena long after the official verdict was declared. Dominion officers watched carefully, measuring every movement. Every word spoken in that chamber would shape future politics, future wars, future alliances. General Kale had been escorted away in silence, not executed, not celebrated, simply removed from command pending review. That alone sent a message across the fleet structure. Tradition had been challenged and survived. When Valara returned to her flagship, the command bridge felt different, not because the ship had changed, but because the crew had. Officers who once saw Earth as a distraction now observed the humans standing beside their commander with new calculation, some with respect, some with uncertainty. He did not attempt to sit in the command chair. He did not act like a conqueror. Instead, he stood slightly behind and to the side, studying tactical displays quietly, absorbing information, asking questions instead of issuing orders. "You do not claim position," Valara observed softly as the bridge cleared. "I don't need one," he replied, watching the starfield through the forward viewport. "You already have it." She considered that the Dominion valued hierarchy, visibility of authority, but what he offered was different. influence without display, support without dominance. Reports began arriving from surrounding sectors within days. Smaller, allied species that once hesitated to approach Dominion space now requested diplomatic channels. Citing the new direction of leadership, Earth itself experienced a surge of interest from systems that had watched the royal challenge closely. Humans were no longer viewed as fragile newcomers. They were seen as strategic partners capable of shaping one of the strongest military empires in the Alliance. Yet peace was never permanent. Intelligence indicated that remnants of Kale supporters still operated in hidden sectors, not openly rebellious, but dissatisfied, waiting for signs of weakness, waiting for proof that the royal challenge had been a temporary spectacle rather than lasting change. Valara knew this. Legends create enemies, she said one evening as the warship entered stable orbit above Earth once more, the planet glowing peacefully below. They also create hope, he answered. She turned slightly toward him, her armor reflecting the soft blue light of Earth's oceans. Hope is not a Dominion strategy, she said. It might be now, he replied calmly. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty. Over the following months, joint operations between Dominion fleets and Earth defense units began forming, not for conquest, but for protection of trade routes and civilian systems threatened by piracy. For the first time in recorded Dominion history, military briefings included psychological resilience models developed by human analysts. Conflict de-escalation options were considered alongside offensive maneuvers. Valara did not lose her edge. She remained the Crimson Blade when battle demanded it. Her precision, her command presence, her willingness to strike decisively did not fade, but there was calculation behind it now that extended beyond victory. On Earth, citizens no longer looked at the red warship with fear alone. Children pointed at it with curiosity. News commentators spoke of Alliance strength instead of occupation risk. One evening, standing again in the same city square where the cultural pairing program had first revealed their match, Valara removed her helmet before the crowd without ceremony. A simple gesture, but powerful. He stood beside her, not as a soldier, not as a ruler, but as a partner. They expected me to dominate or to fall, she said quietly, looking at the skyline. And what did you do? He asked. I adapted, she answered. The wind moved gently across the square, carrying the distant sounds of a living city rather than alarms. Above them, her fleet remained alert, not because war was certain, but because readiness was part of who she was. You once asked if I was fragile, he said with a faint smile. Her eyes softened slightly. And I once believed strength meant standing alone, she replied. Across the Alliance, stories began to spread, not exaggerated myths, but documented events. A human civilian who stood in a gravity field designed for elite soldiers. A warrior princess who shielded civilians instead of prioritizing conquest. A royal challenge won without execution. The narrative changed slowly but permanently. Humans were not the strongest species in physical combat. They did not command ancient fleets or dominate sectors through fear, but they possessed something rare, the ability to remain steady under pressure without losing compassion, to influence without forcing, to stand beside power without being consumed by it. And Valara, the Crimson Blade, had not become weaker because of that influence. She had become more dangerous to those who relied on rigid tradition, more unpredictable to enemies who expected simple aggression. On quiet nights, when a warship hovered like a protective star above Earth, she sometimes stood without armor, watching the planet rotate beneath her command. You changed the Dominion, he said once. No, she corrected gently. We did. The galaxy would remember the royal challenge as a turning point, but history would remember something deeper. Everyone else in the cultural pairing program found gentle partners, safe companions designed for peace and comfort. He found a warrior alien princess feared across star systems. And she found something she had never been trained for. Not a weapon, not a rival, but an equal who taught her that strength was not proven by how many battles you win. It was proven by what you choose to protect.